Here we are. What up? What up? How y'all doing, fam? It's your man Sean P. Here on the Sixth Degree Griots podcast. Here live on YouTube, man. I have a very, very special guest today. I am so excited. Can't wait to give y'all this conversation with my sister. We have Dr. Aria Halliday and her book Black Girl and How We Failed Them. Y'all need that, man. Go out there and get that. Go out there and get that. How you doing today, my friend?
I'm good. I'm good. No complaints. How you, Sean?
Let me do your official introduction, right?
All right.
So today's guest, we have Dr. Aria S. Halliday, Associate Professor of Gender and Women's Studies and African American and Africana Studies at the University of Kentucky. She's a leading scholar on Black girlhood, Black feminism, and popular culture, with award-winning research featured in top journals. She's the author of By Black and How Black Womanhood Transformed U.S. Pop Culture, editor of the Black Girlhood Studies Collection, and the co-director of Digital Black Girls Project. Dr. Halliday is a cultural critic, writer, and thinker whose work challenges how Black girls and women are represented and reimagine how they deserve to be seen. Dr. Halliday has been a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, I love them, incorporated since 2011, as well as American Studies Association and the National Women's Studies Association since 2014. She's a native English speaker with conversational expertise in Spanish and Arabic. That's dope.
I appreciate you. Oh, it's just, I'm so excited to be here. And I appreciate, thank you, Sean, for the opportunity to just share a little bit and do what we do. So you asked me to start off with the poem that opens the book. So I'm going to read straight from the book here. And if you don't have it yet, go get your copy wherever books are sold. Okay. Get it. Got it. Good. All right. So the book starts with this poem that I wrote called Sometimes I Go Missing. Sometimes I go missing from myself. I leave me behind in hopes of finding a piece of mine that I lost somewhere along the way. I lost it after daddy chose violence rather than explanation or care. I lost it after that boy forced me on my knees and my teacher asked me what I was wearing when it happened. I lost me when the boys, the teachers, the homegirls, the lovers, the family members, the people who said they loved me would rather I be silent than explain how they hurt me. I lost me trying to please everyone because I was told that is what good girls do. I lose me more when they reward me for taking care of others at my own expense. So sometimes I go missing from myself. And I never know where she goes until I find her in a quiet place, hidden away from the world and from me. I think she leaves when she knows I am not safe for her. When I choose to protect others instead of her, sometimes I go missing from myself, and this time I am not sure I will find her again.
Man, that's a powerful, powerful piece. So let me ask you a question. Like, what does this piece mean to you personally? And why did you choose poetry to open up the book?
That's a great question. So, if people have been following me a little bit, they know that, I've been a creative for a very long time. I grew up in Durham, North Carolina. So I grew up around poets. I grew up around creatives. I grew up around writers. And I would say that I'm like a kind of a fake writer, right? I mean, I write stuff, right, in terms of poetry, but I don't really share it publicly. And then over the last couple of years, I've gotten more comfortable with sharing it. And so, I was trying to figure out how to open the book, right? We need a foreword, we need like a note from somebody. I didn't want it to start kind of stale, right? And I wrote this poem when I was kind of stuck, actually, trying to figure out what I was going to say, how I was going to introduce the book. And I don't know, it just came to me. And I thought about, it's personal. I thought about, my experiences with my father. And I talk about it later in the book. I talk about my own experiences with lovers and people who mistreated me. And I think like what I kept feeling throughout writing the book was rage, right? I don't know if that's okay to say, but I was pissed. And I think, we can talk about what it means to be like emotionally driven in our writing, but I also felt like kind of possessed by the ancestors. Like this needs to be said. And I feel like we've been trying to say things like this for a really long time. And I hope that it comes through as like a love critique, right? I want to say this in love and I want you to understand I'm saying it because I appreciate and love all of us, but we got to do better, right? Not just for me, but for all of us, right? And I think like we're at a stage at this moment where people are ready to have that conversation, I think. And so I think, this book, is really just an opportunity to start talking about the things that have happened to all of us, not just women. I mean, my focus, of course, is girls and women, but I think this is an opportunity for all of us to lay it out and say names.
So let's kind of tease that out a little bit. So you being a scholar, a high intellect, very well, all these things. When it comes to being emotionally driven in your writing, I find sometimes talking to the scholar is a divide in that sometimes. And sometimes people don't like reading nonfiction because they think it's just dry stats, facts, names, dates. They don't feel that emotion sometimes. So talk about the emotionally driven writing and the importance of that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that in all of my writing, I don't know how I write with any kind of care about what I'm writing about. Like I write about Black women and girls. They're my homegirls and my sisters, right? It's me. I don't know how you write about people that you care about without emotion, right? You got to care about it. And so for me, I kept, I talk about a couple movies, I talk about, some shows, but it's stuff that I watched, the stuff that I was seeing, and I was like, is this okay? Like, are people not noticing this really problematic narrative that I'm seeing over and over and over again? And I think, it's so important actually that emotions are a part of the work that we do because you can't disentangle them, right? You can't be a scholar without the emotion. And I think it's a lie actually of white supremacy to say, practical is over here and emotions is over here. Like that's not real. Like we actually put that shit together all the time, and we actually have to be like pointed in the ways that we do that. And I hope, again, the book is an opportunity for people to kind of think about what those things mean together, right? Not just my life is over here and my work is over here, but those things are intertwined all the time.
So my brother in the comments right now, I love the interactive chat. He goes to PWI, right, in school right now. My professor told me you can't be emotional and a scholar. Crazy. That's what we're being told.
It's lies. Don't listen to them. And let me be real, right? I also come from an opportunity where like people told me not to write about this stuff, right? Let me be black people told me not to write about this stuff. And yes, 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 right. It's not just PWIs and white folk, right? It's some of us saying like, this is not to be said. And and being driven not just emotionally but like my own self of center, right? Like not thinking about what other people gonna care about, how many books are sold, what people want to read or not read, right? Like being like, I think this needs to be said, let me write it. And that being the driving force between what I've said and not, I think has made a difference in showing up places like this, right? I mean, it gives me opportunities that I think writing kind of disentangled from my emotions would never get me.
Talking to a few PhD friends of mine in private, but even like following some writer's Substack, you see so much talking about them trying to unlearn what they learned in school. Almost like school hampered their writing ability, things that they
Yeah.
picked up in school. So it's an interesting dichotomy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what you learn in school is a form and a formula, right? Like just like I don't know, I'm gonna take y equals mx plus b. Y'all remember that math? Right? You learn a formula, and then from there you learn how to do all kinds of things with the formula, right? But I think that people assume the formula is the only way to write, and that's not true, right? And I think like the formula can help you write a very specific thing. Like if you want to do the super academic high theory, only for other academics, you could do that, and the formula teaches you that. But to write to other folk, right? To write about your experience when, let's be real, Black people were never a part of that conversation. So to write about Black people from the beginning is already outside of the formula, right? And so, I think know the formula. I'm not telling you not know the, know what it is, but also know, how we do our thing. We remix, we flip it, we run it, we do all those things. We scramble it up, we cook it up. So I think it's important, right, to know what the school is telling you to do, but also, know it so you can break it.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I love having a little icebreaker to start the show before we get deep into the work, right? So I
Okay.
love talking about hip hop with my scholar friends. I love hip hop scholars.
Okay.
Give me your top 5 rappers, dead or alive. Quick fashion, top 5 dead or alive.
Top 5 dead or alive. Okay, this is really hard. Because I believe in both and you don't have to have only 5. But anyway, I think For me, Missy Elliott is one. Two, I think, um, people gonna laugh. Tyler the Creator is two. That dude's dope and just doing really interesting things. Three, I think it's Doechii. She's new, but I think doing some things that, arguably Queen Latifah would love, Lil Kim would love, right? Okay, that's three. Four, oh, I grew up in the South, so T.I. got to be on the list. I write about T.I. in the book, right? He's problematic as fuck, but he's in there. Four. Okay, five. Oh gosh, this is so hard. I mean, I'm from the East Coast. It's Biggie all day, right? Yeah, there's a B.I.G. in there.
My all-time fave is Biggie. So you good with me. You good with me.
Thank you.
All-time fave. Dead or alive. Come on, man. So the next icebreaker follow-up question. In today's landscape, who are your current favorite female rappers?
Oh, well, I gave you a little, prequel for that, but Doechii's on there. She's so great. She really is so great. Um, my brain is like not gonna give me you tested me right now. Okay, Doechii. Missy Elliott is still making music, so Missy's always on the list. Um, I like Glorilla. I listen to her way too often, to be honest. The energy is there. Let me see. Oh, see, there's a sister out of Memphis. I'm not remember her name right now. It's not gonna come to me. But there's a sister from Memphis. I love her music, and it's not gonna come. That's okay. It's gonna come back to me eventually. And then I don't know. I don't know if I have a five. Ooh, I don't know if I have a five.
It's cool. It's cool. It's cool. So when it comes to ladies of hip hop today, in your lens on Black women representation, how we're presented, how we present ourselves, what are your thoughts on some of the current artists today when the women have more power than they did back in the day? They're writing their own bars, they have their own social media pages, they got their own tours. So a lot of ball is in their hands now. What's your thoughts on women hip hop today in the landscape?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Number five is Cardi. It came to me. So, I think that right now, it's a great opportunity to be a Black woman rapper, right? I mean, even if you're a girls, right? There's Megan. How did I not say Megan? My brain is doing crazy things. Megan's on the list, obviously, but anyway, I think if you're a girl, Megan, Doechii, Lotto is in the list. Sexy Red is doing interesting things. I think there's a way that like there's so many lanes that you could possibly occupy as a Black woman rapper right now, and so it's a great time. It's a great time to be a Black woman rapper. If you think about dropping your shit, drop it right now. I think it's great. I think also because there are so many that have like gotten really big, right? I mean, they got Nike endorsements. They working with Taco Bell and McDonald's, right? They all over the place in ways that, we never thought of really in the 1980s, right? When 1970s when music was really popping. So I think like it also makes it difficult because you're like, I gotta sound really big for me to be successful. And I think there's so many really talented Black women rappers all over the globe, right? But they kind of have to fit a formula in a certain way for them to be considered popular, right? They have to have a TikTok popular song. They gotta, be out here in certain ways. And I think that that's a problem, right? It really hampers people's creativity and ability to really be themselves. And I think one thing I miss a lot about the 90s in terms of like hip hop, early 2000s is like regional sound, right? I miss people sounding like where they from. And I think like, maybe it would be nice to get back to that where people can be like, I'm from middle of nowhere, Washington State. Let me go off. Right. And I think there's something really creative and dope about that. And it only expands our complexity, right, as people to know what we sound like where we are and not we all need to sound like the formula. So
Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for that. So I pride myself in reading the entire book, all the different sections. I actually wrote a book about the sections of the book. Because so many of my scholar friends, I realized They were skipping the introduction, skipping the afterword, skipping the prologue, you know? So I have a question for you.
Okay.
In your acknowledgement section, out of all the books I read for this show, I have never seen an author talk about shout out to the people who are stumbling blocks along my way. Tell us about why you put that in your acknowledgement section about the stumbling block.
Well, over the course of this book felt like, I'm gonna say this. This book felt like the book I always wanted to write. Like it was the thing that like lived in me for a long time that I always wanted to say that I felt like has been kind of like germinating for a really long time, like just trying to gather it in various ways. And I think that like um I felt it necessary to say like, this book is gonna do and live long, long beyond my own life, right? And I think it's important to say like, there are not always people who are celebrating what you do. They're not always people who are hype and loving what you do. There are people who try to come for you, right? For no other reason than you doing something that they don't think you should do. There are people who are naysayers. There are people who tell you that you shouldn't do it. They're doubters, right? And I think like it's really important to also acknowledge like sometimes you could be propelled by those people like okay you thought you were gonna stop me but let's get it and so it was really important for me to say like there were a lot of people right who came in between when I got my PhD in 2017 and when this book came out in 2025 right people who disagreed with me people who thought what I was doing wasn't good people who thought I didn't know how to write right like all of that and I'm like okay well thank you. I appreciate you so much. So the book is really, the acknowledgments, who do you acknowledge? I want to acknowledge the people who said I wouldn't get here. Because I'm here and you not.
Come on now. Come on now. Give it to them. Give it to them. So the earlier influence and foundations to the book. You mentioned Jasmine Mans Black Girl Called Home, which as a poet and a lover of reading poetry and just hearing it, she is so dope to me, Jasmine Mans, right? So what did that book give you personally and as a scholar when it comes to helping shape this book? What did that book mean to you?
I mean, there's so many sections of that book I cried, right? I mean, I think Jasmine, I'm gonna say Jasmine Mans. I don't know her like that. Jasmine has such a good has such a good way of like saying the things that I want to say in like such great poetry. I think like if you're a writer, if you're a reader, if you're a lover of words, right? Like poetry is the best form to do that. And I think Jasmine is just such a great um she knows so much about how to like make words do the thing that you don't think they can do, right? And I think she's so great at that. I mean, the poem that I talk about that inspired kind of the introduction of the books. Sometimes I go missing my own poem, and then where the book starts. I mean, it's a crossword puzzle. Like who a word search? Who does poetry like that? Like I like I've read a lot of poetry in my lifetime and I've never seen that in a book at all. And I think what I love so much of Black Girl Call Home is that she's just doing so many creative things, and I think can inspire you to just do your own creative things, which I think is the hallmark of a really dope poet if they can actually inspire you to do something yourself. So yeah,
I would say when it comes to her writing, because I could be a talkative person, right? But she has the economy of words. So with
yeah,
some of those poems in the book, it's very minimal words on the page sometimes,
yeah,
but the amount of impact she's able to have in a few words really, really made me reimagine the way in which I go about writing myself.
yeah, yeah. That's a great way to say that. That you said that economy of words. She got it.
Yeah. So a hard chapter for me, but probably as a guy reading the book, the most important chapter. In chapter one, you speak on my favorite, my number two, right? 1A, 1B, Jay-Z, Jay-Z, T.I., and Puff. Some of the fathers of hip hop representing the dads. But you also lay out the ladies that they harmed along their way to maturation, right? Could you please give us a good breakdown of that chapter when it comes to the guys? And for some of us, unfortunately, we hurt a lot of women as we elevate in our lives.
Yeah, I mean, so I try to think about, and I interview, I should say, like, it's not just me and my thoughts, right? I interview some of my homeboys, right? Like, so in the acknowledgments, I named some of my homeboys who are fathers themselves. And I said, like, okay, when you think about your own construction of fatherhood, like, who do you turn to for information? Because I think we're of that generation where people are like asking new questions about what parenthood is supposed to look like, and who should you turn to for advice, right? So it's not necessarily your dad, because maybe your dad wasn't there, or maybe he was terrible, or maybe he was great and you were like, okay, I want to model after this. But people also got information from hip hop, right? And so I think that chapter is an opportunity to think about the ways that we learn from hip hop, not just like lyricality and music and stuff like that, but we learn life lessons, right? Like that's part of what people in terms of like the field of hip hop education believe. Like hip hop can teach us about how we exist and live in the world. And so I was like, okay, well, what does hip hop teach us about fatherhood? Like, what do we know from the OGs of hip hop, right? And of the ones who are still alive. I mean, it's some nasty stuff, right? Not just about like how we interact with women, how do we treat our children, how do we interact with our families, right? Like there's this narrative like, we bring everybody, we hold everybody down, but it's like, do you really, like, what's actually the narrative? And so I remember reading this article about Jay-Z, and this guy was talking about how he's like the ultimate rap dad. Like he's like the quintessential dad. He's made this pivot from being, Hove, Jigga, whatever, to this dad move. Now he got Blue Ivy. Now he has the twins. He's married to Beyonce. Like he's the ultimate dude. And I'm just like, what actually do we know about his fatherhood? What has he said? Right? What has he communicated about how he parents? Because we've seen a lot about how he's partnered, right? Lemonade and 444 did a lot of that. But there's also some narratives in there about how he was as a parent. And he was on lots of different shows about, this 444 album, but also like, who he is now that he's matured and he's gotten so much better. And I'm like, okay, but what has happened in the in between? And there was so much news about T.I., and of course Puff is in the news right now. So I'm not even gonna really touch that. People have context, but I think that like there's a way that they have gotten off with, just like, oh, that was a thing that I did. And I was like, okay, but that's not even a thing that you did. It's still stuff that you're doing right now, aka Puff, right? It's stuff that you're doing right now that you still have not named or apologized for, or told us that it was a bad idea. You did it, you made a song about it, and then we left to our own devices to figure out what that means. And I think particularly when it's about how we treat Black girls, right, the narrative is, hey, they'll be fine, or she was a hoe, it's cool, or whatever. And I don't think we can actually talk. A lot of people want to talk about, relationships right now or dating. There's constantly a conversation about dating online. We got to talk about how we treat children way before we get to their dating and they're in a relationship and whatever, because that's where we learn how we want to be loved. This is how we learn how to love other people. This is how we learn how to treat people, right? They used to say, treat people the way you want to be treated, right? That's not a rule anymore. I don't know what happened to the golden rule, but it's not the golden rule anymore, right? And so I think that like we got to be real about where we learn some of this stuff from. And I think hip hop is a big proponent of that, right? Hip hop has gone from kind of a niche conversation where we listen to a couple people here, again, regional sound here and there, to a global industry, right? And so what messages are we sending about parenthood, but especially when we're parenting Black girls?
Yeah, I know. This chapter in the book hit me hard, and then the book called "Ride or Die" interviewed that author like about a year ago, and she had a chapter in her book as well that made me think. Like I tell my friends, for a lot of us guys, the females that we date early in our life, it's almost like taking practice shots. Like we don't even know. And like you said, we're not asking our fathers and our grandfathers like how to go about. We're just guessing. We are really, really just throwing to the wall, see what stick. And then when
Yeah.
you finally do mature, unfortunately, you hurt so many people while you was practicing. And like anybody I can apologize to, I try to make it a point to contact them if I can find them. And like I was young trying to practice, man. And it's unfortunate because like you
Right.
saying,
Well,
you hurt so many people when you practice.
yeah. Well, and I think the part that is really important is like it's totally okay to like mess up in practice, right? But we got to acknowledge, right, and take an accountability for the mess up, right? Like, so I never really played sports like that. I don't like things being thrown at me. That's not my thing. But the one time I did try out for middle school basketball with my homegirl, because she was the basketball player, right? There was constantly a conversation like, how do you take accountability for your space on the court, right? How do you, if you playing man to man, how do you control this space right here? And I think so often in our relationships, we don't take accountability, right, for that man to man experience. We don't say, yo, I was actually scared, right? Like I ghosted you because I was just scared about how that happened. Or, I mistreated you and I said these things because I didn't know what else to say. Or, the last girl I was with said this to me. And so that's what I put back on you, right? And I think we don't actually allow ourselves that vulnerability, right? To actually, for even ourselves to be like, I was harmed in the past and that's what I'm dealing with. And that's why I'm harming you. But also like, what you did hurt my feelings. So that's why you're getting this, whatever. And so I think that we have to do a lot better about not just like naming like, yeah, you harmed me, but also being vulnerable about like, yo, I'm not showing up as my best self right now.
And in sports, if you watch the game, the universal my bad sign is this. So you miss a shot or you get a bad pass, you be like, hey, my bad, my
Right.
bad, my bad, my bad.
Right.
And we need to have that in everyday life, like a universal, hey, my fault,
Yeah.
my fault. It's on me, it's on me.
Absolutely.
We need those, we need those. When it comes to recent pop culture, we had the singer Ari Lennox. She had a lot of backlash because she was critiquing the way that the character Pam was treated in the '90s hit sitcom Martin. I love Martin like crazy, right? Um, do you see that as an example of how Black women have not been protected in media or cultural images?
I think that's a great example. I mean, one, not only there's the example, of course, of like Martin and how he was constantly treating Pam, but there's also like Ari Lennox talking about this experience and then how she was treated, even talking about it, right? Like Martin, Pam, that whole experience is fictional, right? So we can say, okay, people do outlandish things when it's fictional, that's what happens. However, the way that Ari Lennox was then treated because she talked about it is another problematic way that we like recirculate these ideas, right? So I don't think there's anyone who could say Martin treated Pam well. Like that's like part of the joke, right? The joke is how poorly he treats her. But I think, and I mean that it doesn't help that of course she's dark skinned and there's constantly this like dark skin, light skin thing happening. But even he mistreated his wife Gina, right? Where there's not even a conversation where there's a joke about her head getting stuck in the frame, right? When she has a really important and he's like, oh dang, my bad, right? He doesn't even help her. And I'm like, is that really what we're doing? Really? When she's having, these interactions with his mother, there's no kind of accountability on his part to say, like, yo, this is my wife. Like, this is the choice that I made. Respect my choice. This is my wife. Treat her well, just like you would treat me. There's no kind of, and that's the joke of it. But like, how ridiculous is it that we make harm a joke, especially when it's against Black women? Right? We say that we care and we love them in our community. We want to be partnered with them. We want them to be the mother of our children, whatever. But there's no accountability piece, right? Like, how many times does Martin actually apologize to Gina or Pam or anyone else that he mistreats in the show? And this is an example of Black masculinity in the 90s.
You're totally right about that. Totally right about that. I definitely, growing up in that time, loved Martin every week. We tuned
I
in.
love Martin.
We
I'm
going
not
to
saying
school the
not to
next day
love
talking
Martin.
about, you saw last night with Never Martin? No.
Yeah. I'm not
But
saying
like you
not to
said,
love
having that,
Martin,
that
but I'm
more critical
saying
eye now to see it kind of differently.
absolutely. I'm not saying not to love Martin. I'm not saying not to love any of these people. If Jay's your dude, let him be your dude. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying,
Yeah.
what information are we actually,
Mm-hmm.
thinking about consuming, right? By constantly seeing Martin disrespect the women who he says he loves, right? Or are his friends. What kind of friendship is that you can constantly disrespect her every time she shows up at your house, but then ask for her help when you need it and expect her to show up for you? That's not
Yeah.
friendship.
No, no. So when it comes to Black girls and how we treat them or how we not see them, right now in Virginia, there are reports showing that there are about 3,200 children missing this year, with 35 in August alone. And
Mm.
it's barely making national headlines at all. I haven't seen it anywhere, really. From your perspective, what is the silence around those children, especially Black girls, reveal about how we value or fail to value Black girls?
I mean, this has been a conversation for a long time, right? Like how often it is that there's a white girl that goes missing and she's plastered everywhere. We get Amber Alerts, you getting text on your phone. I mean, they still trying to find out who killed Benet, what's her name? Benet Ramsey. I can't remember her first name now. Right, but they're still trying to find who
Isn't it
killed her.
like John Benet
Jean,
Ramsey?
thank you, Jean Benet Ramsey. It's been about 40 years now. She would have been adults. And we still trying to find out who killed her. There's still specials about it. There's all this stuff, right? Okay. There are literally Black girls getting murdered every single day. And there is not one story about how they got murdered or what the conversation is, right? And I think that that's a great example. Like even the dichotomy between how we treat missing white people versus how we treat missing Black people. That's a whole story on its own. But then when we talk about the gender part of that, I think especially with the police, we are ready to have a conversation about how police have treated Black men, but very rarely are we ready to talk about how police have treated Black men or Black women or Black girls, right? And I think like that's a part of that same conversation, that like when we're talking about the race or a race question, we're talking about Black men. When we're talking about gender, when we're talking about sex and sexuality, we're talking about white women. But where exactly are Black women and girls in that conversation? But if it's politics, if you're talking about child rearing, if you're talking about cooking, if you're talking about relationships, Black women are the ones who are supposed to show up for people, right? So I think having this conversation about missing children is a great example, right? There's a number of Black girls who are missing every single day, but other than their family members knowing that they're missing, there's no kind of national outcry whatsoever. And even like if you call the police, the resources that they're willing to dedicate to look for, they're like, oh, she probably just ran away. And that's the end of the story. There's no conversation about why she might have ran away. How do we get her back? Nothing like that. And I think that's part of the problem. It's just systemic but also personal, and I think the book is trying to like have us think about those two things happening together, right? Your personal experience is not divorced from the collective, right? And the systemic has an impact on both things.
I know you're the cultural critic. Have you seen the TV series on Peacock? I think it's called Found.
I don't think so, no.
You got to check it out, Doctor. So
Okay.
the story in short is about like this Black woman, the main character, but she was kidnapped, let's say 15, 20 years ago. And then she escaped as an adult or something like that. But then
Okay.
she becomes like a detective helping people find missing people, but Black girls in particular.
Okay,
Like
no.
2 seasons of it on Peacock. It's
All
amazing
right
and
now.
awesome. But when it comes to the Black girl missing conversation, like that's the whole premise of that show.
Wow. I mean, I think I saw a really good show. I think it was called Kiki, but it was about a Black girl missing in England, right? So even sometimes when we're willing to talk about Black girls and where they go missing, right? They're not ever in the US either, right? There's so many in terms of scholarship, there's so much about Black girls in other places, especially East Africa, Senegal, Kenya, West Africa, those places. But rarely is there actually research about Black girls in the US, right? They don't exist apparently. And I think that's part of the kind of systemic problem that I'm talking about. Like Black girls are already women. Like the Georgia Law Center, right, has a study that says like as young as the age of 5, right, Black girls are expected to be adults, right, to operate as adults. And that means then that they don't get the kind of support to even live their lives, right, with any kind of love, respect, or care. And we see that show up in the media, right, but also right in everyday life.
Wow, that's crazy. I want to ask you about this part in the book. Speaking about like, I mean, of course, I have a podcast. I'm on like 3 different podcasts. So like podcasts and social media and everything. You have a part in the book talking about the Breakfast Club specifically, right? And so I have not been a fan of the Breakfast Club, like personally, for my own different reasons, right? But like recently, there was an artist on there a few weeks ago, and of course, I guess her team asked them not to discuss this certain topic, but it showed like how they still brought the topic up. She got a lot of backlash behind her race and her ethnicity and things of that nature, and they didn't respect her wishes as an artist. So tell us about the Breakfast Club and like some of the harm that's done by this kind of media that we all digest so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Breakfast Club, you know, Me, you're gonna be on here forever because the breakfast. I really got problems with these people. They are parasites, right? Like I don't know that they actually push the culture forward, right? Like in the '90s and 2000s, we were talking about 106 in Park. We would say like, oh, 106 in Park. We learned about new artists. We learned about stuff that's happening politically. We learned about culture, right? They had Teen Summit where we're able to talk about political things going on in the country, right? All this stuff. What is the Breakfast Club doing? What are they helping us know? Nothing. People come on there to promote their stuff, okay, but 90% of the times they don't even get to talk about that stuff. They're talking about whatever random stuff is happening on the internet. It's usually like gossip and random commentary. You don't even actually get to hear what they like. Monique has been on there, I don't know how many times, and 90% of the conversation is about, okay, well, what happened with Lee Daniels? Like, child, that's not helping us. It doesn't actually help us do anything. And I think, like, real talk, it doesn't help us actually have conversations with people about anything. It's always sensationalized, right? We're always thinking about, oh, what's the gossip thing? What's the quick thing that we can like talk about and gossip about and tell our friends and like, oh, girl, did you hear about X? Like, actually, can we have a conversation? Actually, can we say, oh, Monique, you wanted to be on the show. What's the thing that you're trying to pivot about? Because there are a lot of people who've been on the show, and it seems, and I talk about this in the book, that when they are Black men, they do a little bit of gossip here and there and stuff. But then I'm like, okay, well, Ray J, you got this new thing happening. What you doing? Or they're willing to make this pivot. But when Black women and trans people, queer people show up on the show, it's the complete opposite, right? Like T.S. Madison was on the show and they was talking about like how do you suck dick and all this other stuff. And I'm like, okay, T.S. Madison is an author. There's so many other things that we could talk about. Why is this the thing that we're discussing? Right. And I think like Kiki Palmer was on there. Same thing. They're willing to talk about like the sensational parts of her life, but not actually willing to talk about the stuff that she wanted to get on there for. And I think, I'm sad to say it, but we got to divorce ourselves from the Breakfast Club. They're not good. It's not good for us in general. But Charlemagne in particular, look, if you want to have me on, I'll call him out personally. Charlemagne, baby, you got to get yourself together. For real.
Ooh, wee. Wow, that's crazy. Um, a question from the chat, right? This is kind of a tough question, but we gonna try. So
Okay.
thoughts on using AI to protect Black women, like using possible chip implants to track them. Just throwing out possible solutions.
I think right now there are so many implications of AI being used poorly against us, right? If we think about, in theory, the police should be a good idea. The police have not been proven a good idea for Black people, right? In theory, right, social services or child services should be a good idea for Black families. In general, there's constantly proven that they just be taking people's kids for no reason at all, right? So I don't know in our current environment that AI would be a good idea or supportive for Black women or Black girls' overall well-being. But I think it's possible, right, in the land where like AI is not like killing communities. Like I know we've heard talking about like communities in Memphis that are literally being like decimated because of the data centers that are built there, or the communities in I think it's Louisiana and Mississippi who like their water is literally being depleted because AI centers are sucking up so much water to be used, right? Like the Texas grid is crazy. You talk about Houston and the way that people are treated, so I think like there's a possibility for AI, literally artificial intelligence, so not real thinking, not real intelligence. It is possible for it to be used in a way that's helpful, but not currently the way that it's been used. And maybe I don't watch too much TV, but Black Mirror has told me everything I need to know about how these people are going to use AI against me. I'm not interested.
Okay. So again, you the movie buff. Have you seen Damascus yet? Damascus.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
love that. I
I
love
think
that.
I think there's really good examples. A good one that just came to me is They Clone Tyrone. You seen that one? It's such a great example of like it could do something really dope, but like I don't think it's dope for us, right? So I think there are ways that even and there are communities. I just learned about a sister, Angel Bush, who has a organization that's like Black Women in AI, right? So there are people who are trying to figure out how we have AI work for us. I just have not seen it, you know, not just like the actual material working for us in a way that's helpful, but the amount of energy that they're using, our resources, right? We're already in communities that are, you know, poor, they have worse air, they have worse water, right? And so having AI centered in those places is only going to hurt us more. So I don't know how we get to a place where it's helpful. I think it's possible, but I haven't seen it yet.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So in chapter 2 of the book, very interesting chapter for me, you was talking about the surveillance of the Obama daughters through
Mm-hmm.
technology. So Sasha Obama, for an example, she is called the city girl by the critics. First, can you unpack what are they implying by the label calling her a city girl? And second, how does that tie into the larger issue of how Black girls are policed and monitored on social platforms?
Yeah, so there's a really great scholar, Kira Gant, who writes a lot about Black girls on YouTube and like their videos. You know, you posting dance videos, twerk videos online, and the way that people in the comments, right, will try to groom them. It's like, oh, you should, you know, wear less clothes next time, or you should do right, giving these them directives about how to post these videos that are supposed to be just for fun, right? And so I think that, you know, social media and the kind of surveillance that happens through social media, um, you know, can be really harmful to especially young girls. But I think the psyche of older girls and Black women in general, Black women are constantly being attacked online. And, you know, I think that the city girl Sasha, that whole example, right? They're trying to say, like, oh, she's ratchet or whatever. And I'm like, she literally is the child of millionaires. I don't know how we could ever identify her as ratchet. But but also ratchet can't just be you showed up and you sang some lyrics to a song, right? So I think there's a way that the surveillance and the constant idea that like we need to know everything about everybody online, right? There's a way that like because they are semi-public figures, but they're private citizens, they weren't elected officials, they were little kids. But there's a way that we are constantly interested in whatever they're doing, constantly have to know what they're doing and why they're doing and who they're doing it with. There's like this conversation about Malia and who she was dating. Is he white? Is he not white? Are they smoking? What does it matter, right? Like, actually, they're just regular people,
Let
private
me
citizens.
Can I ask a question? I
Yeah,
don't know the answer to this. Are any of the previous presidents' children even monitored like that? Like after the presidency? Like
not
to this
not in the
extent?
same way. So
Right.
the not in the same way at all. So the Obama daughters were some of the first kids since like JFK to be like actual children, right, while in the White House. And there was kind of a rule after what happened with JFK, as you might have been, and he was murdered, all this, that like we're not gonna talk about people's kids like that, right? So if you remember like Chelsea Clinton in the 90s, we knew she existed. We didn't know nothing about what she liked and disliked. She wasn't at state dinners. We didn't talk about what she was doing, where she was with. And then Chelsea Clinton, as she became an adult, stepped into the political light, doing her own foundation work and stuff like that. And that's how we know who Chelsea Clinton is. But there are not this kind of continual kind of surveillance of children of former political officials in the same way. But I would add to, you know, there we also are surveilling the Obamas, right, as the first, you know, Black family in a very particular way, right? We're constantly, what does Barack have to say about this, and why hasn't you know, why hasn't Michelle said something about this? And I'm like, they are technically private citizens, right? We're not out here, you know, in George Bush's mouth every 5 seconds, but apparently Barack Obama's he 3 presidents ago, but he's still supposed to be out here saying stuff, right? Just because we don't have that expectation of other presidents. Jimmy Carter died quiet, right? He was chilling. We're not out here asking him every 5 seconds, well, what are you doing about the political part? Leave him alone. They're private citizens. They served the country. They did their jobs. Yeah. So no, but social media helps us, right? It helps us surveil these people because you want to know what they doing, why they doing it, what they wearing, where they went yesterday, who they having dinner with, right? There's all these ways that like social media kind of curates that surveillance culture for us.
Something just jarred my mind, and it's something I want to ask on the Breakfast Club question. It's a follow up question. So once again, Jay Z, my dog, his song he had called "Ignorant," ignorant shit, right? So do you think like the consumers of that kind of media is the reason why the Breakfast Club is always like amongst the top podcasts in the world? The numbers and I'm sure sponsors and all that come along with it, but like the consumers are feeding into this is what we want.
Absolutely, right? I mean, media does not exist without consumers. So, if you decide, all of a sudden people stop buying newspapers on the street, right? Newspapers went digital. Okay, people stopped reading newspapers online. So, newspapers basically stopped existing, right? In a lot of places. And this happens with all media, right? You learn, I mean, Netflix, I don't know if you remember when Netflix first came out, but it was CDs, right? Like DVDs they mailed to your house, right? Original Netflix was DVDs they mailed to your house.
Now that's
And
crazy. That's crazy.
that's crazy, right?
That's
Now it's
throwback.
like
That's throwback. That's throwback.
now it's like, oh, I can turn on anything and Netflix just exists, right? No, there used to be a process where you got things sent to you so you could watch or consume it. And now, because of streaming services, because of social media, there's this constant consumption culture where you're expected to be a part of the culture, right? Even part of our conversation is like, oh, have you seen this? Do you know what this is? Have you seen this? Right? You're expected to consume, right? But also it encourages you to surveil other people, right? Like how many times people in the store and they taking pictures of people, they're recording stuff, right? I mean, there's a way that like that encourages that kind of, like you said, ignorant shit to be encouraged to be posted online. Like the shade room exists specifically, right, for ignorant shit.
I want to ask about this chapter is very important about the mean black girl trope, right? And unpacking that stereotype, we've seen it in schools, media, everyday life. So, where does the perception of the mean black girl come from historically and culturally?
I think so. There are a lot of people would say like, oh, I know mean black women, right? I know like the angry black woman stereotype. Black women, if they, got a neck roll or they, they they have a tone of any sort, they're already angry. And it really comes from white supremacy, right? This idea that black people should not have a full range of emotions, right? You should never be angry, you should never be mad, you should never have a tone, right? Right? Like that comes from slavery, really, like the idea that we constantly have to be on our best behavior and happy little slaves so that white people can feel comfortable all the time, right? And so you doing anything, especially a negative emotion, right, is an opportunity for people to say, oh no, like we need to control that person, they need to be surveilled, they need to be controlled, they need to be you know put away somewhere because they are not operating as the happy-go-lucky person that they should be. And so it gets extended. I think we have a language to talk about the angry black woman and where that stereotype comes in. I mean, there are black women on many walks of life who go to work and they're like, I can't even show up and have a bad day because if I show up and having a bad day, people, are expecting something to happen to me or to have happened because of me. Whereas black girls, I think, have this same thing happen to them in schools and when they're younger, but it's a mean black girl. You assume that like they have an attitude or they're mad or they're being mean to people because maybe they're quiet or maybe they don't feel comfortable speaking in this moment or maybe they are mad and that's perfectly fine and we should figure out why they're mad, right? There's a way that we don't really allow black people, but especially black women and girls, to have space for a full range of emotion. So if we can experience joy, black boy joy and black girl, magic and all this other stuff, we should also be able to be, angry and sad and depressed and all this other stuff and everything in between.
Another question from the chat. Are you familiar with Bell Hook's concept of oppositional gaze? I've never heard that one before. Oppositional gaze.
Yeah, so Bell Hooks, if you're not familiar with Bell Hooks, she's a phenomenal black feminist theorist who has a book called Oppositional Gaze is in, um, I think it's Black Talk. I'm trying to remember. There's like two or three books where she mentions oppositional gaze. So I'm trying to remember the specific one. But specifically, she's talking about the way that Black people are constantly positioned to think about the gaze of white people on them, right? That there's always this idea that we can't show up as our real selves because white people are watching, or we can't talk about the thing that we need to talk about in public because white people are watching, right? Which, again, is this kind of extension of slavery. We're constantly under surveillance. We're constantly being watched by people. We need to be careful about how we present ourselves, how we talk, how we, interpret and deal with things, because something bad might happen if white people are uncomfortable. Thank you. The book is Black Looks. I appreciate you. I think that Bell Hooks's book called Black Looks, Race and Representation, she talks about oppositional gaze. And yeah, it really is an opportunity to think about how, we're constantly, put up against this idea of like the ideal Black person, right? Which is happy and go lucky and they're well put together and they're always nice and whatever, versus like how we actually live our lives, right? And so there's a way, like if you've ever seen like the movie The Help, right? There's this way that like the characters are in the back having their own conversation and doing whatever, and then there's the kind of performative selves in the front, right? And that's the person that white people see. And we have this in a lot of different ways. We talk about code switching, and you're like, oh, this is my white girl voice, and hi, my name is da, 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 right, like the white girl voice, and the right, like there's this way that we have this same kind of oppositional representation all the time, or how we have to interact so that we can get along with white people, so white people feel comfortable, so we can survive, right? And that's what Bell Hooks's concept of oppositional gaze is about in her book Black Looks.
Have you seen that series on, I think it's Amazon Prime, Them, back in the day?
I have seen it.
And it had that character on there, kind of almost spooky. He had that big old grin. He's always,
yeah,
and the black face, I guess, the whole get up, whatever that caricature was, like it's always this like put on that front,
Yeah, I mean that's exactly from that Jordan Peele Get Out, right? That like you're there and you're in this performance and everything is cool, but like it's just skin, right? Underneath that, where you're in a sunken place, right? There's this way that like the real you has to be tucked back in somewhere where people can't find it, because you won't survive. And I think all of us deal with this all the time, right? But it's like how you decide to interpret and deal with it on any given basis, right? I tell people like how I show up at work is how I show up at home. Like you getting I don't code switch. I'll put it like that. I don't have a white voice. I show up as me, and this is what you get.
I don't believe in that. I don't do that. So before we get you out of here, I got a few more questions, right? The time just flew by. I knew it would. I want to talk about Black studies for a little while, right? So in the moment of rising censorship and cultural reckoning, why is Black studies more important than ever before?
Black studies and or the study of Black people, Black life, Black culture is so important, mostly because they don't want us to know it, right? I mean, I think that, at the most basic level, white supremacy would tell us that like Black people don't have culture. We just, doing things. We're just interacting. We're just engaging. And I think that we, in a lot of ways, if you believe in, the origins of Africa and, Kemet and all of that stuff, like we are the originators of culture. Culture that started with us. Existence started with us, right? Civilization started with us. And so I think that like Black studies or the study of Black life and culture and experience helps us survive, right? Like Black people have constantly survived, whatever culture it is that you want to name, right? We have constantly survived. We're still here. And that means that there's something to study, whether it's in health, whether it's in music, whether it's in dance, whether it's, right? We have touched everything. And so I think Black studies is really important right now because it may provide an opportunity of how to get out of the situation that we're in, right? We already know what they do, right? We already know them and how they operate, right? But Black studies, I think, allows us, another way of being, another way of understanding, right? I mean, we were just talking about Jasmine Mans' work, right? And I think Black studies, as an extension of what she does, right, gives us language, right, gives us emotion, gives us opportunity to talk about not only what's happening in our lives, but understand what has happened in lives before us, which can give us the blueprint, right, Jay-Z, for for what happens next, right? Like I think Black people have been trying to survive for a long time, and that means that we, got some stuff. We got some receipts about how to operate in a world that's trying to come for you. And I think Black Studies allows you to, to go into the archive and read and encourage you to know something that I think is really important.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We got a deep question in the chat. We're gonna try to tap on this thing, man. See where we gonna go with this thing. He said,
Okay.
Dr. Holiday, how do you feel about interracial relationships and challenges? I've been in a situation where the family of my female partner did not want to accept me because of my skin. That's the question. Thanks for the question from the chat.
I think you got to love who you want to love, but you also understand that love is a political choice also. And that's bell hooks, that's not me. Right, that is to say that like who you decide to love and how long and when and where, all of that is a political decision, because literally being a Black person still existing is a political choice, right? To decide that you want to be alive is a political choice as a Black person. And they have legalized in across centuries, right, your ability to even exist as a Black person, right? So in an interracial relationship, it's automatically political. It's automatically, right, gonna be a problem for somebody. And I think that like you can't be in a relationship, whether it's with a Black person or not, that you don't feel loved and supported and treated well in. And so if your female partner is loving you and treating you well, they need to have the accountability to deal with their family. And if it's not going to be a conducive and loving situation for you, you got to back away, regardless of who it is, Black, white, green, whatever. I think a lot of times we expect people just to accept us as we show up. That's never the case. There's no such thing as unconditional love. It don't exist, right? Even if you're dealing with Black people, all Black people are not the same. So you're going to have things that are different. But I think that it's really important to be in a relationship where you feel supported, loved, and treated well. And whether that person is of the same ethnic background or not, those things got to be true.
Thanks very much for that, from the chat, So I want to ask you this question before we get out. As consumers of media and culture, what could we do to make sure Black women and girls are seen in the light they truly deserve? The respect, complexity, and love that too often is denied to them. What could we do to be proactive in changing this narrative?
I think, your questions have gotten us here, right? So you talked about the Breakfast Club earlier. Stop listening to them. Tell them they trash. stop using, right? Stop engaging with media that does not support your views or to support the people that you love, right? I think in the same way that we would say, okay, this Black people stop going to Target because Target started acting a fool, right? Okay, in the same way, we can decide we don't want to listen to the Breakfast Club and they ignorant shit anymore. We can say we don't want to listen to this particular artist because they're saying some things that we don't support anymore, aka Kanye West. We can decide, right, that we don't want to participate through consumption with people who do not support us. And I think if we're willing to do it for Target, we got to be willing to do it for everybody, right? Everybody, Black or white, can get it. And I think we need to have that same energy for real, especially with Black folk who mistreat us, especially with Black folk who say crazy things and are out here acting a fool on our behalf, right? I think we got to stop listening to the Breakfast Club. We got to tell them that's not what we want to hear, and they'll be off the radio, because if they have no listeners, no one is going to pay for them to stay online, stay, recording. So I think like we got to understand and remember that we do have consumer power. It allows us to make decisions, right, about what we consume, where we go, how we do it, whatever. And that choice ultimately means the thing can continue or it dies, right? I think if we remember, like at the beginning of the Target boycott, Tabitha Brown was talking about, I'm not going to tell y'all what to do, but like, no, my products are still there, right? Like I'm in a contract. I can't just disappear, so, and I know a couple of people who are like, okay, well, I'm only going to Target to buy Tabitha Brown stuff. And there are other people like, girl, I'm not going to Target for no reason at all, right? Because it's the same money. And I think that we have to be willing to make those decisions, even if they're hard, even if they're sticky, even if sometimes there's accountability and struggles in that, right? That's where the vulnerability comes in. And so I think that like ultimately, like, I know I'm really going off on the Breakfast Club, but I'm so tired of them. Like they're done, right? Like Angela Lee Ye Love, right? Doesn't that say something? Doesn't that tell us something? Just like it gotta end.
So lastly, I have a Sean P question, right? That was all for the audience. This is my personal. So
Okay.
in doing my journalism, going down the rabbit hole, watching a lot of your content in the past, you were a TEDx speaker, right?
Yeah.
So as a public speaker myself, for like 15 years, I've been dying to be on that TEDx stage. Few of my friends have done it. So I want to ask you, like personally, like what was it like preparing for it? What was it like in real time on that stage? Like how did you feel afterwards? Give me the TEDx.
Okay. That's out of left field. I love that. Yo, TEDx is terrifying. Not only because it's like, this could be on the internet forever, right? TEDx is such an institution that like it could touch the entire globe. What I say could literally change people's lives. So it's terrifying in that way. And I have to say, I'm not really an anxious person, but I was very anxious before the recording to the point where like I think I was in the mall the night before trying to figure out what I was gonna wear. Like I was like, oh my, I don't know what to wear. I don't know how this is gonna happen. What's my hair gonna look like? This is a mess, right? Because it's scary. It really is. Like you don't know where this is gonna go. And the other thing that you don't know about in terms of the recording is that sometimes they record stuff and they don't release it, right? So if they feel like, the recording was bad, the lighting was bad, the speaker wasn't really, doing something, they don't release it, right? So there's this possibility that you go through all of this drama, it doesn't go anywhere. And so there's like that in the back of your head too. Like, okay, I gotta come with it, but I also can't be too analytical. I can't be too, scholarly because it's supposed to be general audience conversation. And so for me, it was really, I think, difficult, one, to figure out what I wanted to talk about, two, how to distill that down into, 10 minutes or 15 minutes, because that's the attention span of the people who are watching it. And then, to make sure that I'm not tripping over my words in a way that like it's still gonna get, put out after it's done. And so it was actually, I recorded it and I think it didn't come out for another like 3 months because they really go through and like, clear all of them. And there's so many being recorded that they really want to make sure that they're putting out quality stuff. And so it was a good time, right? And the fact that like I met so many people that I wouldn't have met, right? Because everybody who's also speaking is sitting in the audience before. So they're hearing you, you're hearing them. It's really intimidating actually, because you hear somebody else and you're like, oh, they were really good. And you're like, okay, let me show up, like let me just do this thing. And for me, when I recorded it, I was in New Hampshire and the community up there is, like 97% white. And so it was also being in a room when I'm like the only Black person in the room where I'm like, okay, how am I going to say something that actually is impactful and interesting, but also, right, on this larger scale is going to like represent me 10 years later in a way that I wanted to represent me if somebody goes digging through the internet to find it. So, so,
Yeah, you did a
that,
lot of. I found you everywhere. I found you
I
all over the
appreciate
place.
you.
You have a big
I really try
thumbprint
to be.
online, a big thumbprint.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I try to be out here. There's one of one. There's not another Aria S Holiday, let me tell you. So I would say that like TEDx, if you want to do it, do it. But I think have a really particular idea of how you want to present your idea, whatever that idea is. And just have it tuned in, practice, do it in front of people that do it in front of people that you don't know, work with the mic, work with the stage. Like I tell people all the time, if you're doing public speaking, go and see the space beforehand if you can, right? So you could just like get an energy of the space, because sometimes, energy is jacked up. So you really got to go and like see it and feel it. And so I was able to go the day before and be like, okay, so this is the stage and this is the vibe and this is the room and this is because it was a vaulted stage and everything. So everyone's staring at you. The lights are super bright and it's hot. You
Mm-hmm,
ever
mm-hmm.
you ever
Yeah,
done theater or anything like that? It's like that.
yeah, yeah.
And yeah, you get one take, you maybe two. So you on it.
Jay Z, one take, Jake, one take.
Right.
Yeah, in my years of public speaking, I try to make it a habit to go to the space way early, get myself acclimated. And of
Yeah.
course, anything that can happen will happen, right? So I've asked the venue, do you have the hookup for the monitor and the big screen and then you get there and they don't. They don't have the HDMI cord. They don't have whatever. So you can't use your slide. Now you gotta just pretty much hopefully you know it enough to not depend on that. Like I've had all those things happen in my career, so it's like
Yeah.
you gotta be ready for it.
So you know what's up then. So you ready. So you tell me when your TEDx is happening. We gonna do it. We're gonna make sure it's happening.
So the TEDx brand came in my area like twice over the years. I applied both times. I didn't get selected, unfortunately, both times, but I'm gonna keep on swinging at it.
Yeah, and I think ultimately a lot of the TEDx stuff is like, you got to know the people who are organizing it. So I would say if it's been in your area twice already, get to know them people, become their friends, low key, right? And like,
That's what I
strategize.
found. It's all about who you know. It's all
Absolutely,
about who you know. Who you know.
absolutely.
Who you know. But thank you very, very much. I'm glad to be able to know you a little bit on this
Yeah,
podcast. Thanks for coming. I appreciate every yes that I get. I never take it for granted. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate you. And for my lovely audience, guess what? In about 24 hours, I'll be right back tomorrow, back-to-back shows. I have the sister Zaza Ali coming on, talking about her book, The Science of Self. I can't wait. It's been 5 years in the making to get this show. So we probably gonna do it tomorrow at 5 o'clock Central Standard Time, the Sean P Experience. All right, the live stream is